Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Reirden. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at Tyler Reirden65, or you can follow the show's Twitter at PenguinsFan65. And here in today's episode, we are going to talk about new associate coach Todd Reirden's promotion and contract extension. Some Penguins' possible milestones going into the 2022-23 season, and we will round off this episode with NHL news and notes around the league, and that is all coming up right after this drop.
Oh, slap me, silly Sydney. Could save my face with a rusty razor. Oh, Murphy and the fans are planted like a butcher's dog. Oh, let's go hunt moose on a Harley. Oh, scratch my back with a hat. As he beats Theodore like a ringing mule. Ladies and gentlemen, you got it. Elvis has just left the building.
Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Reirden. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at Tyler Reirden65, or you can follow the show's Twitter or Instagram at PenguinsFan65. And yes, we now have a Twitter account now. Again, it is at PenguinsFan65. And I'm going to go ahead and get right into this first segment with a little bit of some Penguins news. Yesterday, the Penguins have promoted assistant coach Todd Reirden to an assistant coach role, and the promotion also comes with a 2-year extension. General Manager Ron Hextall said this about Tom in yesterday's press conference. Todd plays an important role on our coaching staff. He has had a proven impact on the defense and contributes to a coaching staff as well with his wealth of knowledge from over a decade as an NHL coach. We are excited to extend his contract. Mike Sullivan also had some words to say in yesterday's press conference. As a coaching staff, we value Todd's knowledge, experience, and passion for the game. He challenges us as coaches to be better every day, and his relationships with the player are invaluable. He is deserving of this promotion, and we are excited for him. So a little bit of background. This is Tom's second stint with the team. He was the Penguins' assistant coach from 2010 to 2014 before going to the Washington Capitals and serving as an assistant coach a bit, moving on to their associate coach, winning a Stanley Cup with them in 2018 before becoming their head coach from 2018 to 2020. Todd Reirden came back to Pittsburgh after he was fired by the Washington Capitals at the end of the 2019-2020 season, and he was given two major responsibilities for the Penguins, and that is the power play and the defensive corps. First, we will look at the power play stats since he came into working as an assistant coach role for the Penguins. So in 2020-21, our power play placed fourth in the league with a power play percentage of 23.68%. In the playoffs we placed fifth with a power play percentage of 25. Last season, we placed 19th in the league with a power play percentage of 20.16%. And in the playoffs, we also placed fifth again from last year with a 26.09% power play percentage. So overall, between these 2 years, the Penguins during the regular season was better by 3.5% in 2020-21 versus 21-22 season, and the playoffs were pretty much the exact same these last 2 years. This past season's power play was better by a little over 1%. And so what I think the Penguins should do coming up in this season is to shoot the puck more on the power play. It feels like we pass the puck a million times before taking a shot on goal. All that takes is just one screw up and the puck's on the other end of the ice. So that's the only really big thing I want the Penguins to improve on when it comes to the power play. And so now we will look at the defensive stats from the last two seasons. In the year 2020-21 season, we placed 13th in the league with a goals against average of 2.77. And in the playoffs, we've placed 13th with a goals against average of 3.5. Last season, we placed 5th in the league on defense with a goals against average of 2.71 and a playoff place of 15th with a GAA of 4. So it looks like, based on these stats, that the Penguins are way better defensively when it comes to the regular season versus the playoffs. I know we didn't have as much last playoffs when we played the Rangers. We were missing big pieces like Brian Dumoulin and Tristan Jarry. So I'm sure that is a big problem. But the previous season before, when we played the Islanders, even with Jarry in net, it still wasn't that great. But the Penguins bolstered up their defense this year, getting Jeff Petrie and Ty Smith. So I guess we'll see what Todd Reirden does with the Penguins' new defensive core. And now we're going to look at some of the players that Reirden affected defensively. Pretty much, he took Cody Ceci, former Penguin, a guy who no one really wants, who ship him off somewhere. And what Reirden did to Cody Ceci was incredible. He turned into a very steady blue liner. And unfortunately, the Penguins couldn't afford him in 2021, and Edmonton completely overpaid him. But it was a very big year for Cody Ceci that year. It pretty much saved his career because he was healthy scratches for when it came to the Maple Leafs and the Senators before he came to Pittsburgh. And what Reirden did to help revive Cody Ceci's career is incredible. He also helped Mike Matheson go from a healthy scratch in Florida to being one of the Penguins' best defensemen last year, using his elite physical skills consistently last year, and easily one of the second best defensemen on the Penguins. And it was used as a really good trade chip for when we required defenseman Jeff Petrie. And he most helpfully helped alternate captain Chris Letang, playing some of his best hockey of his career last year. It was for sure a career year when he set defenseman career highs in assists with 58 and points 68, 10 goals, 58 assists, 68 points, one of the best he's ever had in his career. So what will Todd Reirden be tasked with this season defensively? On my list, get veteran Jeff Petrie back to the top of his game. He was well over a point per game when Martin St. Louis stepped in as head coach. I found in an article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette written by Mike DeFabo that Canadiens fans called him the tank commander because of his inconsistent play last year. And then, of course, Martin St. Louis stepped in as head coach, and he was well over a point per game towards the end of the season. Another thing I think the Penguins should do is work with some of our young defensemen, such as P.O. Joseph and Ty Smith. If the Penguins do decide to move Pettersson and or Brian Dumoulin, one of those guys easily from Wilkes-Barre will have to step up, and I think that would be a really good. I feel like this is the year for P.O. Joseph to take that next step as a full-time NHLer and grow his game from there. And working on those youngsters on the left-hand side, like Ty Smith, another youngster we recently acquired from the New Jersey Devils. And I am very excited to see what Reirden can do this season when it comes to the power play and our new bolstered defensive core. So that is it for the first segment of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. Coming up in the next segment, we will look at some Penguins' possible milestones going into next season. That is all coming up right after this. All right, I am back on the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Aaron. If you would want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at TylerAaron65. Or you can follow the show's Twitter and Instagram at PenguinsFan65. And I'm going to go right ahead and jump into the next segment. Here it is some possible milestones going into the 2022-23 season for the Penguins. So starting up real quick here, Malkin and Letang are approaching 1,000 games this year. So Malkin is 19 games away from joining Crosby as the only two Penguins to ever play 1,000 games with this organization. If he stays healthy, he should reach that milestone on November 20th, which is in Chicago, with the next game being at home against the Calgary Flames. Personally, what I would do is, if I was the Penguins, I would ask Malkin if he'd be willing to sit out that game in Chicago so he can play his 1,000th game here in the Berg. I feel like that would be the most ideal situation for Malkin, and it's totally up to him if he wants to do that or not. Letang could join his buddies in that exclusive group in January. He has played 951 career games and is currently 49 games away from hitting 1,000 career games in this organization. Assuming he stays healthy, Letang will play game number 1,000 on January 28th on home ice against the San Jose Sharks, the final game before the 2023 NHL All-Star break. Also with Letang, he is closing in on 700 career points, an achievement that would make Letang 26th all-time in points by a defenseman, passing Hall of Famer Chris Pronger. To reach that, Letang would have to record 50 points this season. Evgeny Malkin is closing in on passing Kevin Stevens for the most penalty minutes with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Throughout Malkin's career, he has collected 1,008 penalty minutes, which lands second all-time in Penguins history behind Kevin Stevens. Malkin will need 40 penalty minutes to pass Stevens this season, a mark that he has surpassed 12 times in his career. For Sidney Crosby, he is in line to potentially hit a few milestones this upcoming season. With the couple milestones that Sidney Crosby could hit, the more likely one is career assist number 900. Crosby is sitting currently at 892 career assists and is only 8 away from getting 900 career assists and would be the 20th player in NHL history to do so. The second of the two potential Crosby milestones may be a little bit unlikely. He is currently 91 points away from scoring 1,500 career points in his career. Mario Lemieux is the only other player to hit that mark with the Penguins. His final career total was 1,723. And Crosby would just become the 15th player in NHL history to do so, but that's if he beats longtime Capital Alexander Ovechkin to it. Ovechkin is currently 1 point higher than Crosby, so Sidney Crosby's career point total right now is 1,409, and Ovechkin's is 1,410. That's their career points. And to finish off these milestones, here one I found out myself after doing a little bit of some math. This one's probably a little bit unlikely, but in the entire Penguins franchise, they only have 1,949 wins in franchise history. That puts them 51 wins away from 2,000 wins in franchise history. And I think that this is the most unlikely to happen, but if we do hit this marker this season, it'll probably be at the very tail end of the season. We have well hit over 50 wins before on numerous occasions, and I don't want to think any differently that we can't do it this year. I know we can. I just think that this is the most unlikely, but 1,949 franchise wins for the Penguins, 51 away from 2,000, and with a little bit of research and math, that's how I got that. So coming up in the next segment, for the final segment, we will talk about some NHL news and notes around the league. That is all coming up right after this. Alright, I'm back here at the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Reirden. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at TylerReirden65, or you can follow the show's Instagram and Twitter at PenguinsFan65. And here in the last segment, we are going to look at some NHL news and notes around the league. Starting off with the big one. Number one, NHL free agent Nazem Kadri signs a 7-year, $7 million deal with the Calgary Flames. Flames trade Sean Monahan in a conditional 2025 first-round pick to the Montreal Canadiens for future considerations. Now, I believe the conditional first-round pick on that is they're both top 10 projected, I believe. So that's the same year Florida traded their first-round pick to Calgary for the Matthew Tkachuk deal. So if the Flames pick is top 10, if the Flames pick is in the top 10 and the Panthers is not, they get the lower. So it's pretty much they get the lower pick, but if they're both in the top 10, they get the 2026 first-round pick. I believe that's what the considerations is on that. But, I mean, you can't say it's officially a new era in Calgary, getting Mackenzie Weegar, Jonathan Huberdeau, and Nazem Kadri. But unfortunately losing two 100-point players last year, with Johnny Gaudreau going to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Matthew Tkachuk going to the Florida Panthers. And former Penguin defenseman Jack Johnson signs a 1-year, $750K deal with the Chicago Blackhawks. I would have figured Jack Johnson would have retired after winning the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. But no, he signs with the Chicago Blackhawks for 1 more year. Shane Bowers, centerman for the Colorado Avalanche, re-signs with a 1-year, $750K deal. Carey Price is unlikely to play for the Montreal Canadiens this season with his knee surgery. The Nashville Predators to host the 2023 NHL Draft on June 28th, 29th, and the awards ceremony on June 26th in Nashville. So they both get the draft and the award ceremony. So I guess we just got to wait till June 28th to see who gets Bedard and Michkov. NHL free agency. is scheduled to begin on July 1st for the first time since 2019, after going through a few years of COVID and weird seasons. It's finally back on July 1st. And probably some of the oldest news on this, and the news you probably have heard of, Robin Leonard will have hip surgery and will be out for the entirety of the 2022-23 season for the Vegas Golden Knights. So they got their own goaltending issue to figure out there. We got a month to training camp, so these teams can figure out what they want for their final roster. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. And I will try and post on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So try and go 3 episodes a week. That's what I'm going to try and shoot for. But yeah, this will do it for this episode of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. And I will see you all in the next episode.